London has a housing crisis, but it's not alone. So do other cities have an answer? I went to Amsterdam, Berlin and Vienna to find out. When you think of Amsterdam houses, you might conjure up images of these. Like London, the city has previously had difficulties building enough homes, and when it did, it started encouraging its citizens to self-build. So should London do the same? Only a few years ago, this area was full of warehouses, until it was sold cheaply to self-builders like Thomas and Julie.
If we're going to do this adventure, then we want to go as well experimental, so it was never meant to be a standard house.
The idea is that you live in your own little climate. So you build a glass house and it never rains, there's no wind, and for 8 months a year it's warmer than 18 degrees.
It may look beautiful, but it's not been easy.
We moved in 3 years ago and it was not finished. So we didn't have electricity, water, toilet, whatever.
We had a moment when friends only ask us, how's the house doing?
It's something others on the street can understand too. Their next door neighbour Wim has been planning and building his home for 7 years.
In the beginning it was really like frivolous, like this very joy and we're gonna do this and it's gonna be beautiful, and then comes the money and your energy, you know, your own. I blew my knee out for once, I had to sit down for 2 months, and I'm all for the self building and have own control of your life. I want the whole city to be like that.
Until the financial crash, Amsterdam didn't have much self-building, similar to London. Now it encourages it, saying it can be cheaper, helps build communities and creates more interesting architecture. Since 2011, there have been plots for 2,440 self-built homes sold here. 70% of this new plot of land is just for self-building, and the city insists it can be for anyone.
The funny thing is, self-building is not for just one group. It's scattered all over the different incomes. So you have very rich people. There's an island over there. I think it starts with €1 million. But you also have these housing cooperatives where people will organize themselves and rent out social housing to themselves.
Just outside the city, it's been done on a much bigger scale. This is Oosterwolde, farmland that's now been set aside for 15,000 self-built homes. This is a much more extreme form of self-building. Although you can pretty much design whatever you like, you have to put in your own water, your own electricity. You even have to work with your neighbours to build the road.
You have to learn things about the entire construction, and you have to talk to your electrician, you have to talk to your installer, you have to talk to your contractor, you have to make sure that the funds are there when you need to pay people.
Here, that hasn't scared off new residents, but advocates of self-build say the biggest hurdle for doing it in the capital is getting people used to the idea of doing it themselves. The architect behind this project says he sees the way the world is looking at building homes changing.
I see an upcoming market of, say, critics, people that are more critical about their environment and that have more ideals. And that has to do with the acceptance of a younger generation, basically, to do more themselves.
This might seem a world away from London, and maybe it is in this extreme version. But from October this year, UK councils legally have to show that they're doing more to consider self-built homes. So do Thomas and Julie have any advice for potential self-builders in London?
Think twice.
No.
No, that's too negative. But it will take time. I think that's the most important thing.
You should be aware, I think, that you still enjoy what you're doing, because it's a great thing to do, build your own house. I still go around in the house and I'm getting happy.
Berlin, home to 3.7 million people. Like London, rents here are rising too, and people are worried, which has led some to protests like this.
We shall not be moved just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved.
We want it to be loud and nice, so not uncomfortable or anything, but we just wanted to raise awareness and bring people together in a community.
This used to be a cheap area to rent, but it's been steadily rising, so that renters like Alfred are now paying double the original price.
Well, we live now here 33 years and we stay here in this flat. Well, our children grew up here, you can see.
Although Alfred's flat isn't currently under threat, he still doesn't feel safe. What would happen if they increased your rents here?
Well, I think we have to go someday. But we are old now, yes. But we have to fight as well for the young generation.
But Berlin does have rent control, and it's called Mietpreisbremse. It means that landlords cannot charge new tenants more than 10% above the local average. And for some people it's worked, like Isabel and Puglia. They realised their rent was much higher than their neighbours when they moved in, but they were nervous about challenging their landlord.
We were knowing about the Mietpreisbremse, I think, from the beginning, but we were
quite not sure how complicated it will get if you take action. You really think that you're pushing your landlord to a cliff, so it feels really not nice. Friendly and nice, yes. And you want to be a nice person.
Yeah.
Their private tenants organisation negotiated their rent down by nearly 40%.
Looking around, you always felt like we are paying too much, and it felt just wrong. And somehow we now have the feeling that we are like having a fair deal and paying a fair price.
In January, Mayor Sadiq Khan said he wanted to look at ways to introduce rent control for London. It's not something his office has control over at the moment. After several years of rent control here, the Berlin mayor has now taken matters a step further and backed plans for a rent freeze for 5 years.
Auch politische Stimmen gibt, die sagen, der Markt wird es alleine richten.
There are many policymakers who believe the market will regulate itself. That demand and supply will somehow work itself out without further intervention. We've seen around the world that's not working. We are all facing the same challenges. I think this is an issue in London, Amsterdam, Barcelona and Berlin.
Wie in Amsterdam, Barcelona und Berlin.
Rent control is clearly on the political agenda here in Berlin. But despite the reassurances made by the mayor and the different schemes that are on offer, some tenants are worried that they will be priced out of the city. And some would say they're right to be worried. Alex Romer is a TV investigative journalist. He's gone undercover to see the problem for himself.
Sometimes you have about 100, 200, also 300 people. Sometimes they had to be informed the police because so many people wanted to have a look at the flat.
Why is it so busy?
Yeah, we don't have enough cheap small flats.
If there are simply too few flats available, it means that some people are left behind. Politicians are still finessing rent control here, so the long-term impact isn't yet clear. But London will be watching to see what works and what doesn't. Vienna, population around 1.9 million, and over 60% live in housing that's been subsidised by the city. Some of the homes don't look like other social housing. So this is Alt Erle, and it was built 40 years ago. And the builders who built it said that the idea was to make luxury that was affordable to everyone. Around 9,000 people live in these 6 blocks.
This is our garden,
including Brigitte and her husband Heinz, who was impressed from the moment he moved in 40 years ago.
It was absolutely fantastic to have terraces on the east and on the west and have a view to the hills or over the city. It was absolutely impressive.
Living across from them are their old friends Inge and Manfred, who moved in as the blocks were being finished.
A very social life. All the doors were open and the hallways were open, and we were dancing on the hallways with people from the next stairs and next stairs, some 20 or 30 people. In the first 10 years it was really awesome. Yeah.
It changed with the children.
With the children it changed. There is no better housing somewhere. That's the ultimate here.
Both families pay around €1,000 a month for their flats and all the amenities.
The community is built from the leisure time activities.
And there's quite a few to choose from. The complex has a model aeroplane club, tennis courts, a musical theatre club, its own church, indoor pools and 6 rooftop outdoor pools with saunas. Unsurprisingly, there's a waiting list for the flats, currently around 5 years. Student Muni and her husband Clements, who works as a social worker, moved in just under a year ago, although Muni grew up here. She's Heinz and Brigitte's daughter.
Because I was born and raised here and I wanted my kids to have the same as I had. We pay €750 for a 90 square meter flat, and I don't think that it's anywhere else in Vienna like affordable like this.
Across Vienna, you can be eligible for subsidised and city-owned homes if you earn just under €46,500 as a single person or just over €69,000 as a couple. It means there's a mix of different incomes living in these homes. Do you think it's right that people who earn more money are subsidised in their housing?
What a question. What a question, because if you put a marker on each head, how rich or how poor is a man, it's very, very bad and stupid.
Some blocks like Alt-Erle were built by housing associations using cheap loans from the city government on the condition of controlled rents. But Vienna also has a 100-year history of building itself, as does the UK. Under the Social Democrats, the city built more than 64,000 apartments in the 15 years from 1919, like the enormous complex of Karl-Marx-Hof, which stretches for over a kilometre in the north of the city.
The main idea here in this building was that all the apartments, they had running water, which was a big improvement, and they also had open spaces and also a lot of community facilities.
For Vienna's government, spending on housing is still a political priority, which sometimes includes having more rooftop swimming pools. Couldn't that money have been better spent on building more homes?
Das heißt, wir wollen, dass sich die Menschen in ihrer Wohnung wohlfühlen. Sie muss leistbar
We try to make sure people like living in their homes. We don't simply want people to be able to afford somewhere and just have a roof over their head. Sometimes you just need a pool on the rooftop or a sports facility to make the neighbourhood high-quality living.
The cost is high, €600 million a year for Vienna's population of less than 2 million. Even with this budget, not all blocks are like Alt-Erle or Karl-Marx-Hof.
There are some municipal housing estates that are quite run down, so there can be some problems, social problems, vandalism, the upkeep of the buildings, so it's not all of this very high quality. And the city of Vienna is trying very hard to keep basically the social fabric in place and integrate newcomers.
Social housing in Vienna isn't a utopia, but its century-old model shows the demands, successes and limitations of what social housing can achieve. Caroline Davies, BBC London News, Vienna.